All right, let's finish this. All right. You know what? Let's not do this right now. Hey guys, and welcome to another video. As you can tell, I broke my finger. I actually did it kind of in a dumb way. I was helping with laundry. Won't be doing that again. I coming down the stairs, slipped down the stairs, and my finger broke my fall. So these two bones are dislocated, and then when it did that, there's like a chip there. They weren't able to relocate it, so I have to wait until like Tuesday to see the orthopedic surgeon, and we'll figure out what happens next. But okay, so Forbidden Fortress, I have generally good feelings about this. They're a little mixed just because it's not a perfect game, but I do really like it. We've been itching, especially my wife has been itching for a very far deeper RPG-like experience, and Forbidden Fortress has that in spades. One of the things I love about it the most is just how nuanced it is. When I throw a bomb in Forbidden Fortress, there's actually a bouncing mechanic. So if I'm able to nail the 2-hit roll, then essentially I timed it right and threw it right, and it lands there and explodes and hits everything around it. However, if I don't, I fumble it or whatever. Either way, it bounces around. And then even then, if it's like in a corner, it'll bounce appropriately in that corner. Like it won't bounce away. And it's really, really cool. And I really, really appreciate that they put that much effort into it. Like Descent 2nd edition, which is really what started me on board games. There's a lot of skill checks. You have like your agility and cunning and lore and knowledge and all that kind of stuff, strength to really determine everything. How much you can carry depends on your strength, and it's really, really cool, and I really like all those deep mechanics of it. However, it means there is a lot of rolling. Now, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but there just is, even on your turn, right? You roll to see how much you move, which it is roll to move. However, if you roll 1, in other words, you don't get to move a whole lot, you actually get a grit, which then you can use right away if you want to roll again a second time. So the least you can ever really roll if you choose to is a 2, which isn't too bad. And there are rules to where you don't have to roll to move. Everybody just moves a 4. I actually didn't come across any issues with that, just based off of how it's laid out and everything and my options as a character. Even during a fight, it wasn't that bad. And it never really came up in the 2 missions I've played to where it was an issue or was frustrating or anything like that. Like I remember the last game of Clue I played, and I couldn't even get to a room. I just kept rolling 1s and 2s, so I couldn't even get somewhere to even say hey, I think, Colonel Mustard did it, because that dude's a freaking murderer. So I couldn't do all that. Generally speaking, roll to move has been considered a bad game mechanic since the 80s. Probably even earlier. People started to figure out, that's not a great game mechanic. It works in here because there's that dice mitigation, and so I'm fine with it. And it is kind of an equal ground, which I thought was kind of weird. At first I thought maybe it would be based off your agility, but my sumo could move just as fast as the assassin, in that instance. Well, okay, so the assassin actually is a bad choice. It does get a +1 movement. Technically, it can move 1 more than me if it rolled a 6. But regardless, that is kind of an odd thing, that I think they could have maybe made a bit more thematic and just gave each character its own movement value. But the game is not balanced that way. And generally speaking, I want to play however the game is best balanced. So whatever they play tested it as, whatever they designed it against, that's what I want to do. But there is a lot of dice rolling. And I mean, everybody is rolling constantly, right? Because you roll, let's say you're in a fight. So you roll for your move, even if you're not moving, because you might get a grit from the 1 and all that. So you roll for the move. Then if you want to do an escape from one person, go to another, then you have to roll for that escape. Then if you come across anybody else with a higher escape, you have to roll for that escape. Then you get to actually attack. And when you attack, you roll for how many things you hit, right? In other words, how many hits actually landed. And then, based off that, then you roll how much damage each of those hits did after assigning those hits out. And then, if they have armor, then you roll for the armor for each hit that landed damage. So, you could, in one turn, be rolling 6 times. And it's probably a bit excessive. However, it goes really quick. Once you get into it, within the first game, actually, the tutorial mission that they have, within that, we were rolling pretty steadily. We knew kind of what we needed to do, and you roll, and then you roll, and you roll. And Unlike a lot of games I don't like Massive Darkness or something like that. I actually like Massive Darkness. The combat in Massive Darkness I find lackluster, because what you end up doing is you roll and then you have to figure out what happened. If a game uses symbols on dice, you have to figure it out. Or if a game, and by symbols I don't mean swords and shields, right? That's really straightforward. I mean, like, I got these faces and I got this, pickaxe and I got this thing, and my character uses these different, right? Or if it's like a Massive Darkness where you're rolling that, but then you have to check your character sheet and where you're on the board and what equipment you have, and then or they are on the player board, and then what equipment they have or what skills they have, and you have to kind of like roll and then find out what happened. And I hate the find out what happened part of it. Even if it just takes a minute, that's a minute more than it should do. I want to be able to roll and quickly know what happened. And this game does that. So while you're rolling a lot of times, you quickly know, bam, did 6 damage. If they roll for defense, okay, no, they got 3 less for their armor or whatever. So it goes really quick, which makes it totally fine. I'm okay with it. Just be aware that if you don't like chucking dice, then you're probably going to be bummed from this game. And this game does have quite a few dice. They're actually smaller, but you're going to be rolling more than like 3 dice, right? I mean, you end up rolling quite a few if you're good. So that's kind of a bummer. By the way, FYI, because I'm trying to get this out to you guys, I don't even have my bullet points here for it yet. I've been kind of internalizing them. I've taken some notes, but I didn't bring them here. I just wanted to film this real quick. I'm feeling up to it today. So I do apologize if it's a bit rambling. So let's see, what else? Oh, the board game map can get huge. I mean, huge. It can take up a ton of space. Now, technically, if you're okay with this, you can start removing pieces of the map. I'm sure there will be a scenario where I have to go back toward the entrance or something like that, but for now I haven't come across that, and so you can actually take off where you've been. Now the reason you can't always do that is, let's say there's 2 doors that lead out, and you take one and that ends up not working, and so then you have to go, like it ends up in a portal maybe or something like that, so then you have to end up or one that doesn't have an exit. So then you have to go to that other one back there. You could house rule it as, well, there's an exit there, right? I mean, you can make that work. And probably something I would suggest you do, just because it's huge. Like, it gets big. The passages are big. And I don't think they could really, without doing a major rule change, they couldn't change it. Just because you need that space. I mean, they're on, fairly small 30mm bases, and that's how big a space is. And if they change the amount of squares in each space to shrink it down, you would have to rebalance pretty much everything. So I don't suggest they do that. I'm fine with it being big and thematic. It does take up a lot of space, so be aware of that. If you're playing on a coffee table, you're not playing on a coffee table. Then you get all these items and cards, and they're just kind of, as you're looting things and gaining gear and whatnot, and so even your player board takes up some space. You got to put all your tokens somewhere too, if you are like gaining fury or something like that. So that's kind of a bummer. Another positive, though, I'm going to try and flip-flop here if I can. Another positive is the actual characters. So I've played both with just the game box, just what comes in this box, retail box, and then also with the Kickstarter exclusives, so I could get a sense of which one's which. More on that later, but even just on the ones that come in the core box, you get a wealth of differences between characters. They do not play as similarly as they might first seem. Mainly because, if he plays a samurai, he's getting these fury things from hitting combat hits or maybe killing them depending on his gear. And so you're kind of trying to ramp those up to do like special moves. So it's almost like a long-term combo system where like you're gaining, your attacks are smaller and they gain resources. So you can do one big attack at the end or one finishing move at the end. And sometimes you want to keep those up for a really bad, maybe an Oni pops up that's powered from a darkness card or something like that. Or maybe an elite mob came out or something and you want to just take them out real quick. You do that. The assassin, based off of what they can, like their different clans they can pick, they can do all kinds, they can heal a little bit, or they can do something that just deals one hit to like everybody on the board, but all their things, they're like a once per adventure thing. So you kind of have to time it right. Like we were at one point in the second one where we had a really bad spawn. We had a spawn that got 2 guys, an Oni and some, the Walking Dead kind of Dreadful Dead or whatever they're called. The little zombie samurai people came up too, and they have an armor roll. So we're already kind of like, that sucks. And a darkness card came out or something that made, or I rolled bad, I think, on Holding Back the Darkness. And so we spawned more enemies. And in this one, it was not, again, from the core box, but the Magma Fiends came in, and there was 9 of them. So we had all these guys on here. We're like, well, maybe we should just have my daughter, who was the assassin, pop her kind of hit everything. But then we realized that later on, we're going to have to fight an elite enemy. And we're like, you know what, we'll hold off. And so, we managed, but it's one of those things that's, you kind of have to judge all that stuff. The sorceress, she has fire magic, earth magic, water magic, and wind magic. They all act very differently, and you can choose which one you favor, or even which ones you draw from. So you can kind of get different play styles that way. Like I had one where she had like this like Tempest move that just kind of debuffed everybody on her map tile. So and I just kept that going. So she was just this walking debuff person that then could like throw fireballs, which is great because it could remove corpses. And then later on I did like thunder, and so I could like I was really good at I could choose not to have darkness cards come up, and then I had like this chain lightning move. And so there's a ton of different ways you can play, even within the same character, not including even the level up system. So even then you can level them up differently. You get a personal card that changes your thing. So maybe it makes you have a higher initiative, so you're actually acting faster in the chain than others, or perhaps it just makes you a little bit tankier, or all sorts of that kind of stuff can happen. And I'm really, really happy with the character selection in the core box. It makes it to where, first of all, there's enough to where you're not playing one of the characters, which I really like, which means you could essentially play it all and then be like, oh, we never played with that guy. And again, it could change everything. If you didn't play with the monk, you don't know what a permanent healer is kind of like. But you could also play the combat monk, where he just like hurts everybody around him. I mean, there's a ton of different stuff that you can do, and I'm really happy with that variety. However, not all the variety is that great. Like Massive Darkness before, and some games are like this, some games aren't. Some games, I think, like Blood Rage, for instance, the core box it's perfect. It's balanced. There's a lot of variety in it. You can get game session of game session, and then you're great. A lot of these kind of campaign style games, though not all, struggle with a little bit of variety in the enemy units. So Massive Darkness was like this as well, where I suggested you don't just buy the core box. If you're going to buy Massive Darkness, buy the core box and then some enemy units as well. Your heroes are fine. More heroes are obviously better. That's how these games gain a lot of content. However, in Massive Darkness, you're just fighting goblin or over and over and over again because there's not enough variety in enemies. Same with this. I don't think there's enough variety in the core box to where I'd get a bit old. Yes, you're going through different scenarios and you're doing all those different missions. However, you're fighting the same enemies over and over and over again, unless you buy some packs that come with some enemies in them, which I would suggest. Even if you just buy the kind of expansion pack, then you get more heroes and more enemies, which is good. But you definitely want that variety. It just kind of spices it up a bit, so you're not fighting the same things over and over again. Now, they do have differences where you can have like an elite version of an enemy, and that's cool because, you know, maybe this one, maybe they're actually faster, or maybe they just ignore armor, so they're heavy hitters. And like Massive Darkness, that's like a lot of the weapons that they could have would change them, or their equipment they could have could change them. But that was every time in Massive Darkness. Here, you don't always get an elite enemy. So if Tengu pop out, you're fighting the same Tengu you always do, unless they happen to be elite, in which case then you're fighting a different version of them. Otherwise, they're pretty much the same. There is a hard and brutal side, but that doesn't really change a whole lot. It just makes them harder, but they act the same. And again, you're not doing that until much later after you've leveled up a lot, and you can just kind of wipe the board with them. Back to the positive side, I think this adds a lot of meta, and the meta to the game is supported within the rules, which is huge. So anytime you get a campaign game like this, where you're playing, like, maybe I'm the monk and I'm just going through all the monks, you know, like maybe I'm a huge healer, but then for the one time I'm going to attack and I just like one shot kill an Oni because they roll a whole bunch of criticals or something like that. And you're like, whoa, you know, do you remember that time when, you know, my monk, you know, hit him all that? and did all that damage and just wiped him out, and everybody goes, yeah, because the dice roll was good, and it becomes its own story outside of the game itself, right? You could actually remember that specific moment in that game. It's one of the things that happen when you have a theme on a game versus when you don't have a theme. When you don't have a theme, you'd be like, you remember that one time you rolled good, placed 2 blue. I mean, it doesn't work as well because you can't create a story around it. However, the rules support this. First of all, it even says in the rules, name your character. So your monk is different than any other monk that you might even play, because you might level them up differently. You might choose a different starting card. You might choose to just play them differently, and maybe he's more aggressive. Maybe you get a personal item that changes. The personal item you get is thematic. Maybe it's a letter from home. Maybe it's like an old trophy. Maybe it could be all sorts of things that kind of give you a backstory that you can make in your head, that I think is really, really cool. Additionally, even, I mentioned like bombs before, but like, okay, so the Oni are large, and so they have like this bash mechanic where if they hit you, they actually can like knock you back. Okay. And I was playing a character, and like I was in a passageway, and he came to me in a passageway because it was an ambush attack. So it kind of popped up, and he bashes me, but the wall was behind me. And the game the game rules talk about how, like, if you're hit into something, then you get damage there. So he hit me, I got damage. I got knocked into the wall, got damage from that. And the fact that the game supports that kind of stuff is really, really great. It's really cool. It's really fun. I love it. My family loves it. My friends love it. It's a great time to have, because you can really just live in the game in your head for a little bit. It comes with a soundtrack, which is awesome. You can play the soundtrack on the side. I'm not a huge fan of the soundtrack. It's just, I think the music I use in like my painting videos for, like Rising Sun, these Japanese games, is a bit better. However, it is all original music for them, and I think in some situations it's a little bit more thematic than even what I choose. However, they want you to immerse yourself in this game, and you really can. One of the problems that comes from all those rules is the rule book is thick, and it's tons of information. And unfortunately, they decided to spend all this wonderful time writing this rule book, this technical document, and they didn't include an index. It's the first thing I check. Always include an index. And you can sort of get away from it if you lay it out really, really well and have a really smart table of contents. Again, not ideal in any sufficiently complex game, especially something like this. You're going to mention things at different places, and it helps have an index to know where everything is. So for instance, like grit. Grit is mentioned both when you're just looking at the token. It's like, hey, grit can help you reroll and do special actions. But then later on, it'll say, by the way, grit can't be used to reroll your holding back the darkness roll. Now, you wouldn't know unless you read that part of it, but there's no index to tell you, by the way, grit is mentioned here and here. That's just one example. There are tons of examples of that, where obviously stuff comes up throughout, or sometimes it's like, oh, we're going to talk about line of sight here because we're talking about attacks, but it won't necessarily be called out, and so you have to kind of figure out where it's talked about and where it's not. Armor acts differently, or defense acts differently on enemies versus, you are. And again, it's just one of these things where the rule book isn't laid out quite as good as I would like, and without an index, it's hard to find stuff. I guarantee I'll still be like looking at the rules, trying to find it, and it takes a while for me to find. If I can look at the index and be like, okay, here's where grit's mentioned, not here, not here, it's bolded here, that must be its main entry point, so I'm going to go there, then great, that's fine. I'm okay with that during a game, especially when we're first starting, especially a complex game like this. So I'm going to have the rulebook right there ready. Right? Oh, I think it mentioned something like this. Oh, yeah, no, armor works that way for the enemies. It's for each hit. That's how many dice you roll, or, just stuff like that you might have to look up. And it struggles with that a lot. Additionally, it's kind of funny. There are some times where it'll say, as mentioned on page 28, in fact, I want to say maybe 2, maybe 3 times it says that in both the adventure book and the rule book. However, more often than not, it'll say something like, as you can see below, and below is actually 2 pages over, because it's written like it's still in a PDF, like they're still writing it in a digital document and not in the actual thing. And so they'll be like, as you can see above, and above was a page over, so you have to flip the page, that's above. It's kind of an odd wording. I haven't really noticed a lot of like badly worded things per se. It's just, I think it would have helped to touch up on that. If you're not going to have an index, it's at least be helpful to be like, back on page 12, and you're like, okay, page 12, and you go to page 12, versus above, and so then you're just kind of having to scan. There was one time where it says as above, and it's at the top of the page. because that's where the page break was when they actually print it. So the rule book could use a lot of work. It seems to answer pretty much every question I have, which is good. So the rules themselves are good. It just, the rule book used as a tool for me to know the game is quite lackluster. Okay, so there's 2 parts of this game, and I really, really like this part. So, and in fact, there's an expansion coming out. I don't believe it's Kickstarter exclusive, and I didn't pay for it. I'm really bummed about that. I actually wish I'd gotten more stuff for this, and I wish they could open the pledge manager for me to get it, but I don't think there is a way to do that, even though there's future waves coming out. However, you have like your mission where you're going into the temple and you're doing all this stuff, and then you can go back to town. And it's almost its own adventure where you're choosing where to go and you're choosing, stuff to do or buy. You can go to like the tavern, and there you can do some gambling, or you can do some shopping, or you can do like a arm wrestling strength match kind of thing in the corner somewhere. Different events can happen. Maybe there's a flash sale on the items. Maybe a place gets robbed while you're there. There's all this kind of really, really cool stuff you can do. That's just it's really neat. It's pretty much a secondary campaign. So you go and you do that, and then you go and you do that. And like if darkness came out, the part of the village is destroyed and whatnot. The expansion adds a whole lot of other stuff. You actually get a map, and then you get like your enemies that can spawn, and it just doubles down on that part of the game, which I think is really, really cool because it's a very nice concept. One of the problems I have with it specifically, and I guess just with the campaign in general, is obviously this game you can play one-off, or you can play as a campaign where you level up, which is great. You can play them in any order. You can kind of make your own, because there's not really an overarching story. In other words, each thing is kind of standalone. However, some can make more sense. Like if the darkness came out, maybe then there's some mission that you can do that kind of changes that or whatever. However, there's just not enough, I think, to tie them all together. So it is kind of like one-off things just with your own people, which I think is kind of unfortunate. I would have much preferred maybe something with like, I'm fine with this, but like if you go back to Descent or something like that, where it has these acts that you're doing, so you can do Act 1 and Act 2, and then depending on how you did on this mission changes. You don't get all that, which as advanced as this game is, I would think that they would be able to support something that advanced, where you're really going through a campaign with these characters and making decisions, or even if you're not making decisions, just where it's a little bit more thematic. For instance, they have this huge map that looks great. It's well detailed. However, you don't use it in the game. It'll say you go to a temple, but it doesn't say this temple on this map. So I can look on the map and say, I'm right there. And that's kind of unfortunate. I would have much preferred to have especially because that map is beautiful and it is great looking. And so it's just really underutilized, I feel. And I think maybe that expansion does that. I don't know. I doubt it, because the missions themselves are already written in the adventure book, and they are not written like that. So that's kind of unfortunate, but otherwise it does all this stuff. Like you can have a travel, like you're on horses and you can get different horses that do different things, and you can travel from location to location, and stuff can happen during your travels. And it has all the building pieces there, but they're siloed, they're separate. And so that's kind of unfortunate. The miniatures are great. They've built really. It's snowing. Just noticed that. My wife's gonna be upset. She hates driving in the snow. It snowed more in February here than it should. January is normally our bad month here in Idaho, but no, it's just been snowing for whatever reason. Is what it is. Stay inside when I can anyway. Okay, so anyway, the miniatures are great. Again, the cardboard is kind of bad, and what I mean by that is like some of the bigger map tiles are already warping, where they're like this, right? And they like wobble, where the miniatures are even having a struggle put on there. I'm gonna have to see if I can't flatten them some way. That's really, really unfortunate. And the biggest downfall to the components, I think. The cards seem great. I'm fine with the cards. I'm fine with the miniatures. Just the cardboard is so bad and so lackluster. I haven't seen this bad of warping pretty much ever. It's bad, and it happened within the first time I used that tile. It's already warped from inside the box. So kind of unfortunate there that they would kind of skimp there, but miniatures, like I said, are great. I think the style of design they do is very strong for them, and it'll make painting quite easily because they're not heavily detailed and finicky. So this should be a joy to paint. I can't wait to paint them when I can. Can't really with this. So, anyway, I've really liked Forbidden Fortress. I can't wait to get some more stuff, and we'll continue to play it. Highly recommend it. If you like deep RPGs and you're tired of like Descent or something like that, this is right up your alley. Just be prepared that it can be a time sink and a money sink. It takes a long time to play these advanced games where you're doing all this stuff and then you're going into the town and then doing that, and so it'll take a whole night of you to play this game. But if you're like me, you're gonna enjoy every moment of it. So really excited for this game, really happy for it. And if you didn't pick it up on the Kickstarter, pick it up in retail and get some enemy expansions if you can. So that's it for Forbidden Fortress. If you've played it, let me know what you think. Again, I have built a dragon. I hope to paint that soon for you guys. However, I did get a shipping notification for Hate. It is coming on the 28th. So expect another OCD unboxing soon from me. I'll paint when I can. There's not much I can do there. Maybe I can figure something out. Hopefully I can get a better splint or better wrap than this on Tuesday when I see the orthopedic surgeon, and we'll just take it one step at a time, guys. All right. Thanks for watching. Always appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon.